It was just a regular evening when I came home. The weight of the long day at work was still fresh, and my tired feet could feel every step as I climbed up to our small apartment on the third floor. The familiar scent of our home greeted me, and for a moment I hoped for a quiet evening. But that hope was quickly shattered as soon as I opened the door. I found Mark, my husband, lounging on the old brown couch. He had the remote in one hand and a half-empty beer in the other. The TV was blaring some show or another, but Mark's focus shifted to me as soon as I stepped in. "Betty," he started, not even greeting me. "I want a pie tonight." I blinked in surprise. "Mark, I just got back from work and I'm really tired. Can we have it tomorrow instead?" He didn't look happy. "You're home now, aren't you? So make a pie. It's not that hard." I sighed. I remembered my mother always said to be understanding and accommodating, but sometimes it felt like it was always me doing the accommodating. Nevertheless, I headed to the kitchen, deciding that making a pie might be the quicker route to peace. The apartment wasn't big, just a single bedroom, a living area combined with a dining space, and a small kitchen. I quickly gathered the ingredients, hoping to finish the pie as soon as possible. As I was rolling out the dough, Mark strolled into the kitchen. "Make sure it's apple and none of that store-bought crust stuff," he instructed. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We had store-bought crust, but I knew better than to use it. Now I made the pie from scratch, just like he wanted. It took me a good hour to prepare everything. The aroma of the baking pie filled the apartment, and for a moment, everything felt cozy and right. I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, this pie could be the start of a pleasant evening. But when the timer went off and I took the pie out, letting it cool on the counter, my hopes were dashed again. Mark was back in the kitchen, barely waiting for the pie to cool down before taking a big slice. After a few bites, his face contorted in displeasure. Without a word, he picked up the plate and threw the pie slice onto the floor, where it landed with a sad splat. "That was terrible," he spat out. I was stunned. All my efforts, all the care I put into that pie. And this was the reaction I got. Tears filled my eyes, but I tried to hold them back. What was wrong with it? I managed to ask. I said tentatively. "Everything?" he replied curtly. "You should know better." I didn't know what to say. I felt so small, so insignificant. The shattered pie on the floor seemed like a reflection of our relationship, broken and messy. Feeling defeated, I cleaned up the mess, the weight of years of unhappiness pressing down on me. It wasn't just about the pie. It was about everything. The lack of appreciation, the constant demands, the way Mark looked at me or didn't look at me. All of it. That night, I knew I needed a break. I couldn't stay in that apartment. I needed to be with someone who understood, someone who cared. That's why I turned to William, my brother. He had always been my rock. Grabbing my bag and leaving the mess behind, I decided to spend the night at his place. William's home was a cozy 2-story building with a small garden in the front. I didn't even have to knock. He must have heard my car because he opened the door before I reached it, his face filled with concern. "Betty," he started, pulling me into a comforting hug. "What happened?" Tears streamed down my face as I mumbled. "He threw the pie, Will. The pie I made after a long day at work. He just threw it on the floor." William led me inside, settling me on the soft couch in his living room. "Tell me everything," he urged, handing me a cup of hot tea. Sipping the warm drink, I began to recount the events of the evening. As I spoke, memories of the past also surfaced. "It wasn't just tonight, Will. It's been this way for years. I always thought things would change, that he would change. Remember when we first met at Jenna's party? He was so charming then, I reminisced. William nodded. I remember. But Betty, people can put on a facade for a while, but their true colors always come out, you know. I continued. When we first got married, everything was great. We'd go on dates, laugh, talk for hours. But as the years went by, he changed. Or maybe I just saw the real him. William's face tightened. He didn't start off this way. I shook my head. No, we'd have our disagreements, but it was never like this. Over the years, he just became more demanding, more critical. I don't know when I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells around him. William sighed deeply. You know, Mom and Dad had their issues, but Dad never treated Mom this way. I know, I replied, tears forming again. I thought I could change him, make him see how hurtful he was being, but no matter what I did, it was never good enough. William looked at me seriously. Betty, love doesn't work that way. You can't change someone who doesn't see a problem in their actions. I looked down, taking another sip of my tea. I remember when Mom and Dad would argue, but Dad would always apologize, always make up for it. Mark never does. There was a pause, then William said, Betty, you deserve better. Remember when we were kids, we promised each other we'd always be there? I'm here for you now. You need to think about yourself, your happiness. I nodded, taking in his words. The realization was growing within me. This wasn't the life I envisioned for myself. I deserved respect, love, and care. And it was clear I wasn't going to get that from Mark. You're right, I finally admitted. I can't keep living like this. It's time to make a change. William squeezed my hand. I'll be with you every step of the way. The morning light filtered through the curtains of William's guest room. I stretched, feeling more rested than I had in a long time. The decision to divorce Mark had brought with it a mixture of relief and apprehension. Walking downstairs, I found William already up, making breakfast in the kitchen. Morning, sis, he greeted with a warm smile. Good morning, I replied, pulling up a chair at the dining table. He placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. You need to eat. Big day today, he said. I nodded, taking a bite. I'm nervous, Will, but it's the right thing to do. He sat across from me, sipping his coffee. It's never easy, but remember, you're doing this for yourself, and I'm right here with you. After breakfast, William drove me to the lawyer's office. As we parked, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the steps ahead. Inside, we were greeted by Mrs. Harris, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes. But as she spoke, her kindness shone through. Betty, I understand this is a difficult time for you. My job is to guide you through the legal process and make sure your interests are protected, she said. Thank you, I whispered, feeling grateful for her support. The meeting was long, filled with paperwork and legalities. Mrs. Harris explained everything patiently, ensuring I understood my rights and the process ahead. As the days turned into weeks, life became a whirlwind of appointments, meetings, and paperwork. Mark, to my surprise, remained silent throughout this time. He neither signed the divorce papers nor contested them. He simply seemed to have disappeared. This silence was unsettling. One evening, while sitting with William in his living room, I expressed my concerns. It's strange, Will. Mark hasn't reacted at all. No calls, no messages, nothing. It's like he's vanished. William looked thoughtful. It is odd, especially given how he was earlier. But maybe he realized his mistakes and wants to move on. I hope so, I sighed, though a nagging doubt lingered. Life continued its pace. I started looking for a new place to live, wanting a fresh start, a home where I could rebuild my life without the shadows of the past. After a few weeks of searching, I found a beautiful house. It was spacious, with large windows letting in plenty of light, a stark contrast to the dim apartment I had shared with Mark. I felt a connection the moment I stepped in. This was my new beginning. William was ecstatic when he saw the place. "It's perfect for you, Betty, a place to call your own," he said as we toured the house. I shared my plans with him. "I want to paint the walls light blue, maybe have some plants by the windows," he chuckled. Always the planner. It sounds wonderful. Moving in was a joyous occasion. With the help of William and a few friends, the house quickly started to feel like a home. Every evening after work, I'd return to my sanctuary, relishing the peace it brought. However, that peace was short-lived. One fateful evening, as I returned home, I found the front door ajar. A chill ran down my spine. Pushing the door open, I stepped in cautiously. The sight that greeted me was unexpected and alarming. There in the living room sat Mark. My heart raced as I took in the scene before me. "What are you doing here, Mark?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, his face showing a mix of smugness and defiance. "Well, it's our house, isn't it? We're still married, Betty," he retorted. "But I bought this house after we separated. It has nothing to do with you," I shot back. Mark sneered, leaning back in the chair. "Doesn't matter. As your husband, I have every right to be here." Just then, Anna, my neighbor, walked in, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Betty. He showed me his ID and marriage certificate. He said he had the right to be here." I sighed. "It's okay, Anna. This isn't your fault." Turning my attention back to Mark, I said firmly, "You need to leave, Mark. This is my home, not yours." Mark chuckled. "Think again, sweetheart. I'll be staying here, and if you try to kick me out, I'll make sure to claim half of everything in our divorce." The audacity of his claim left me reeling. I felt trapped, cornered in my own home, but I couldn't let him see my fear. I needed to be strong. "Fine," I said, trying to sound calm. "Stay tonight, but tomorrow I'm getting a lawyer, and we'll see who has the right to be here." Mark smirked. "Bring it on. I'm not going anywhere." Feeling defeated, I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I needed to think, to come up with a plan. Grabbing my phone, I called William. "Will?" I said, tears forming. "He's here at the house. He says he has a right to it." William's voice was filled with anger and concern. "Stay calm, Betty. I'm on my way. We'll sort this out." Hanging up, I tried to calm my racing heart. Mark's sudden reappearance and bold claims had taken me by surprise, but with William by my side, I felt a glimmer of hope. Within minutes, William arrived. I heard the two of them talking in hushed tones downstairs. The tension in the air was palpable. After what felt like an eternity, William came up to my room. "Betty," he began, his face serious, "there's something you need to know. When we bought this house, I made sure it was in my name. I had a feeling Mark might pull something like this. Legally, he has no claim to this property." A wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you, Will. I don't know what I would do without you," I said, hugging him. "We're family. We look out for each other." The next morning, armed with the property papers and William's unwavering support, I confronted Mark. Seeing the documents, he realized he had no ground to stand on. His smugness from the night before had disappeared. "This isn't over, Betty," he hissed as he left. Days turned into weeks, and with every passing day, the intrusion by Mark felt more like a distant memory, but the threat he posed remained. William and I, however, weren't about to sit idly by. One evening as we sat in the living room, William looked at me with a seriousness I had seldom seen. "Betty, I've been thinking. We need to be prepared for any moves Mark might make. He's unpredictable." I nodded. "I've been feeling the same, but what can we do?" William paused, taking a deep breath. "I've hired a private detective. I wanted to know what Mark's been up to since the two of you separated." I looked at him in shock. "A private detective, Will? Is that necessary?" William sighed. "I just have this gut feeling. I want to make sure we have all our bases covered." I understood William's concerns. His protective nature was one of the things I cherished most about him. "All right," I conceded. "What did the detective find?" William pulled out a folder from his bag, spreading the photos and documents on the table. My heart sank. The pictures showed Mark with various women, some looking familiar from our past life. One document caught my eye. A police report filed by a woman against Mark. "He did this," I whispered, disbelief evident in my voice. William nodded gravely. "It appears Mark's activities haven't been on the straight and narrow. This could be our leverage if he tries to make any more moves against you. We can use this against him." I felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal. "I can't believe he sunk this low," I said. William put a reassuring hand on mine. "We'll get through this, Betty. Together." A few days later, our preparation proved to be fortuitous. A letter arrived from Mark's attorney, making wild claims and threats about taking me to court for supposed shared assets and conjuring up fabricated tales about our life together. Reading the letter, my hands shook, but William, ever the pillar of strength, looked at me and said, "We're ready for this, Betty. We've got evidence he can't intimidate us with." With William's support, we met with Mrs. Harris again. As she read through the letter and went over the evidence we had against Mark, her face remained unreadable. After a long pause, she finally said, "We have a strong case here. Mark's claims are baseless, especially with the evidence we have. We'll counter this, don't worry." Relief washed over me, but the idea of facing Mark in court was still daunting. William, sensing my anxiety, squeezed my hand. "We've got this. I won't let him hurt you anymore." The counter-move was set in motion. Mrs. Harris swiftly drafted a response highlighting Mark's activities and questioning the credibility of his claims. The ball was now in Mark's court. Every day after that was a game of wait and watch. William and I spent many evenings going over the possibilities, preparing for any scenario. Through it all, William's unwavering support gave me the strength to face each day. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when the knock echoed through the house. With a look of mutual surprise, I went to open the door. Standing there was a woman, soaked to the bone, her eyes red from crying. "Are you Betty?" she asked, her voice shaky. I nodded cautiously. "Yes, who are you?" She took a deep breath. "My name is Jenna. I was involved with Mark." My heart skipped a beat. "Come in," I said, motioning for her to enter. Once seated, Jenna began her story. "I met Mark a few months ago. At first he seemed charming, but soon he started showing his true colors. I heard about you, about his past, and I thought I should come and warn you." "Warn me?" I thought. What could be worse than what I already knew? Jenna continued, tears streaming down her face. "He became aggressive, possessive. He said things about you, about how you'd ruined his life, and he wanted revenge." William's face darkened. "What kind of revenge?" Jenna hesitated, looking down. He talked about ruining you financially, said he had friends who could make it happen. The room was silent for a few minutes, the gravity of Jenna's words sinking in. Finally, William broke the silence. We need to do something about this. We can't let him continue to terrorize people. I nodded in agreement, feeling a newfound determination. We need to expose him. Let everyone know who he really is. Over the next few weeks, with Jenna's help, William and I gathered more evidence against Mark, from his financial misdeeds to his numerous affairs. The depth of his deceit became apparent. It wasn't just me he had hurt. There were others, just like Jenna. With everything we had, William suggested we go to the police. It's time he faces the consequences of his actions. Walking into the police station, I felt a mix of fear and hope. Would they believe us? Would they take action? Detective Rogers was assigned to our case. As we laid out our evidence, he listened intently, occasionally asking questions. Finally, after what felt like hours, he spoke. This is substantial evidence. We'll investigate further, but from what you've shown, it's clear that Mark has been involved in illegal activities. The next few days were a blur. The police acted swiftly, arresting Mark on multiple charges. The news spread, and soon, the monster I had once called my husband was unmasked to the world. Months passed after the revelation. With Mark behind bars, I should have felt safer, and while there was certainly a sense of relief, there was also the constant fear of what Mark's friends might do, those he had often bragged about, who he said would always have his back. One day, as I was returning from work, I noticed something odd. My mail was scattered all over the porch, and the front door looked like someone tried to tamper with it. Panic surged. Could this be one of Mark's allies? I immediately called William. "Will, I think someone tried to break in. Stay calm," he replied, his voice firm. "I'll be right over." I waited inside my car until William arrived. Surveying the scene, he confirmed my suspicions. "It looks like an attempted break-in. We need to beef up your security." Over the next few days, William and I worked on improving the safety of the house, installing security cameras, and an advanced alarm system. One evening, as we were testing the systems, the alarm suddenly blared. Rushing to the monitor, we saw a man skulking around the property. But before he could make any moves, the local police, alerted by the security company, arrived and apprehended him. I felt a rush of gratitude towards William. His foresight had prevented another potential disaster. The next day, Detective Rogers called. "Betty, we've got the intruder in custody. He claims he was sent by Mark, but we're still confirming the details." This confirmed my worst fears. Mark was still trying to control and hurt me, even from jail. Days later, I got a call from Jenna. "Betty, there's something you should know." She hesitated before speaking. "Mark's been reaching out to people from prison. He's been trying to spread lies about you." I gritted my teeth. "Thank you, Jenna. He won't get away with this." That evening, William had an idea. "Betty, we need to turn the tables. We've got evidence, Jenna's testimony, and a lot more. Let's go public." The next week, with the help of William's contacts, we scheduled a press conference. The media turnout was massive, with numerous reporters eager to hear my side of the story. As I stepped up to the podium, my heart pounded. "Hello, everyone. Today, I want to share my story, not just to expose Mark's cruelty, but to give hope to all those who've been in abusive relationships." I detailed everything, and as I spoke, the room was silent, every eye focused on me. When I finished, the questions began. "Do you believe Mark is still a threat?" I replied confidently. "Yes, but I won't let him or anyone else intimidate me any longer." Another reporter asked, "How do you feel about him now?" I paused for a moment. I pity him. For someone to have so much hate, he must be truly miserable. After the press conference, the support was overwhelming. Messages poured in from all over, many from women sharing their own experiences. It was clear that by speaking out, I had ignited a movement. That evening, as I sat with William, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, Will, for everything, for being there when I felt alone." William smiled warmly. Family sticks together. Weeks turned into months, and life started to regain its rhythm. I reconnected with friends, started a support group for victims of abuse, and even began dating again. On my birthday, I held a small get-together, and as everyone left, William sat down next to me. "You've done well, Betty," he said, tears glistening. "With a little help from my friends." He chuckled. "Always."